Welcome to the Quick Stop F1 podcast. My name is Nyahsa and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Joining me for a emergency Bomber Club podcast. Don't piss me off. I'm not here to rap. I'm not here to play. 105, baby. So we were going to record tomorrow, and tomorrow we have a podcast with Tandy and Mahad from Pit Stop Tracker. But obviously, given the fact that Lewis Hamilton had just won at the Belgian Grand Prix, we had to get something quick for you guys out, just so you could have a little morsel, a little amuse-bouche, a little starter, entree, hors d'oeuvre for you to nibble on until we get to the main pod. And for that is a man who had so many opinions. I was going to do this on my own. And I'm actually quite happy I'm not on my own now, because I've got someone who was so keen to lay the fucking gloves on George Russell today. He called me. He was on the road. He called me and he said, yo, I've got things to say. I've got things to get off my chest. Can I come through? I said, Brad, there's always a place for you here on the Quick Stop F1 podcast. So welcome to the show. It's the one, the only chief enemy of the Orange Army, our good friend, Brad Philpot. Welcome, Brad.
Hey. Yeah, thank you so much for accepting my request. And you're right, I was on the road. I was on my way back from Silverstone. So I spent the day today at the home of the British Grand Prix, watching the race on the Hamilton Straight in my new bright purple Hamilton hat that I bought just before the race. I was there with some friends who had come over from America to watch some single-seater racing that was on today. But I made sure we stationed ourselves at the bar at the hotel, which is on the Hamilton Straight. Massive screen. You can see it on my Twitter if anyone cares to see what it looks like. Had a beer, had a burger, and watched a really good race until George Sneaky Russell decided to say, oh, my race isn't going so well. Let's just have a bit of a gamble and see what happens. And yeah, then it started to go downhill, and we can discuss it.
That it does. I mean, it sounds pretty familiar, right? Not the first time either you or I have sat in front of a camera and a microphone and lambasted the Hail Mary strategy from George and the ascension, whatever, the acquiesce of that request from Mercedes to George on that. And we'll get into that. But you guys at home, if you're watching, thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5-star review. If you are on Apple, make sure to give us a rating. And if you're on Patreon, log in for the ad-free stream. And I forgot to ask, if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe. Shout out to all the new subscribers. Brad, I don't know where to start with this.
I can start somewhere. Oh, go on, and you go. It's your podcast. You start us.
Do you know what, Brad? Fuck it. Why did you want to come on the show? What was it about today's race that had you so up in arms?
Right, so George Russell, fair play to him, has done a really good job against Lewis since they were first teammates. You know, on average, he's done really well. They're super close in qualifying, and he's generally fine in the races, although I think we probably all agree Lewis has a bit of an edge on race day. But when George Russell has a great performance, I'm happy to sit back and say, yeah, fair enough, that was great. And, like we said, sometimes that happens in qualifying a bit too much. But today wasn't one of those days, and this weekend wasn't one of those weekends. And Russell was just behind Lewis all weekend, basically, in the wet, in the qualifying. And in the race today, Lewis just did everything required by the strategy to overtake on track, get ahead, pull away, and had essentially won the race. It was a slam dunk win. And we get this situation where Russell sees that he's not having a great race, and he just suggests, because he's kind of got nothing to lose, and maybe it's a 5th place or something, but he doesn't care that much. He'd rather go for the glory. And he suggests something to the team, which they then say yes to. And they shouldn't. And in this situation, obviously, we know now why they really shouldn't have, because it went completely wrong at the end. But anyway, the team say yes. And then that gives him this artificial track position that he hasn't earned. And that's totally cool if you're racing against a different team. But when you've got a teammate who, you've got a team where you've discussed strategies beforehand and you understand if everyone does their job properly, you know the relative positions you're going to come out in, and you know that you're not necessarily fighting against your teammate. When they've been miles off in the race and they're down the order, they're not in the picture. So Lewis is fighting a particular battle. The team, who should be on your side, then effectively rip that up mid-race, just at the request of the second driver, and then suddenly put this roadblock in front of you. So Lewis now has this, not only does he have to try and eke his tyres out to the end of the race to stay ahead of the McLaren, Piastri, who's chasing him down, which is one job, but he's now got this secondary task where he has to use enough tyre up to catch his teammate up by the end of the race and then have enough of a delta to actually overtake him on track as well. And it's just a totally unnecessary problem that shouldn't be there for that number one driver. Like, the team should have said, actually, George, for a number of reasons, the one I've just given, no, we don't think it's a good idea to do this. Stick to the plan we've all agreed, including the guy who's, we're going to go win the race here at this stage with our other driver. So just do the best job possible. And then, as has transpired since the end of the race, the other reason you don't deviate from the strategy is because you might overlook the fact that by staying out an extra 14, 15 laps or whatever it was around one of the longest tracks on the calendar, if not the longest, you wear the tyres out more. They then weigh less at the end of the race. And as we've discussed pre-show, it's only 375 grams per tyre that he needed to have worn more to come in under the weight limit, which he did. That's 1.5 kilos. Without having an in-lap to pick up marbles and then build that weight back up again, because at Spa, they go straight into the pit lane at the end of the pit straight. He didn't have the opportunity to regain that weight. And as we've seen, he's coming underweight. That isn't ultimately on Russell to take into account. The team should have said to him, probably not a good idea. But the fact that he suggested it, and in the past, he's kind of got away with it. Zandvoort 2022 still riles me because that was one of our, in a real hopeless year, that was a particularly good chance for Lewis that Russell's alternative gamble strategy ruined. This time it was a similar thing. It just, fortunately, kind of justice prevailed in the end. And I don't hate Russell. Yeah. I don't like him being Lewis's teammate, but I don't like him doing stuff like this where he hasn't won on merit. It would be a brilliant strategy call if it was Team George Russell, but it's not Team George Russell.
Yeah, and I think, look, that was incredible prose. I'll give you a little cheer for that. That's the polite one, but you're spitting. You are spitting. And look,
also, Max was nowhere. How good was that? Where's your 14th to first?
Awful. Awful. But look, we will, you know what, I'm not even going to sully the waters of the Team LH celebration with that bump. Anyway, so I'll talk you through my process after the race. So I'm as gutted as everyone. I'm absolutely heartbroken. But I guess in looking to rationalize what I've just seen, I'm looking at, I guess, a situation where, I guess, looking at it without the context of the team dynamics, the team history, what should be the team hierarchy, but there is no team hierarchy because that's how they operate the team, but I guess we all know. And I guess without looking at it from, I don't want to say a moral situation, but I guess from a what is right situation, and maybe morals, right? Everyone's assuming that the two-stop strategy is the strategy that is going to take everyone to the end, and everyone's working towards a two-stop strategy. And I guess if you're Mercedes and you've already pitted Hamilton, and the only person in front of Hamilton, I think at the time, potentially, when this call came in, maybe Oscar hadn't pitted yet. I don't know, Oscar hadn't pitted yet. So when the call for when the call from George came for the one stop, which I think came on lap 26. I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, well, they think that the tyres aren't going to last. They've told him the tyres aren't going to last. Toto Wolff afterwards says their projections had him finishing in 5th anyway, whatever. And I guess even if it does work, with Lewis, I think it was around 9 to 10 seconds behind. I think we all, at that point, when he called that, just assumed, well, Lewis is going to catch him at a rate of knots. He'll have enough tyre delta to be able to whiz past him up over Rouge and onto the straight. And, whatever, even if he tries this strategy, maybe he comes second, maybe he comes third. But, what's the worst that could happen, I guess, is how I imagined that encapsulation. So I guess, when it turns out the way it turns out, and, you look at Lewis locking up, and you look at, I guess just the fact that in isolation, someone making those tyres go 24 laps, not knowing what we're going to know after the race, not knowing what we know, and not taking into account the things I'm taking into account, you look at that as like a really good performance. And it's tough luck, tough shit, whatever, these things happen. But then again, I think I even tweeted this week, maybe, how one of the worst feelings that I felt between 2021 and now was Zandvoort. And the reason for that was this Hail Mary approach. And I don't even think it was a Hail Mary approach from George. He had cooked his tyres so much, even though he was on an offset strategy, he'd still cooked his tyres so much that he had to come in, or he'd forced the team's hand, almost drove into the pits as he said he was coming in, forced them to change his tyres, left Lewis exposed, I guess, and obviously Max passed in. Now, we never know what's going to happen there, but that hurt. And I guess I didn't see the similarities between that and today for whatever reason. But listening to you, listening to people online, and hearing things that were said, it's such a ball drop from Mercedes in so many ways. And the fact that these ball drops continually happen with Hamilton, really and truly, this is where the breakdown in trust from Lewis towards the team has come from. And this is what has enabled a situation where Lewis is offered 1+1 contracts and Lewis is not falling out, but Lewis feels that he's not getting that support from the team. We saw it in Singapore when they didn't come to the podium, and we've seen it, in potentially, again, that Singapore podium day when, the team hardly celebrated or mentioned the fact that he got that podium, and George Russell, all they mentioned was George Russell crashing out. So having looked at all of that, it like, I don't know if this is how Oscar Piastri fans felt last week, but it does, I think for me, it sours it a bit, because I naively thought the team were almost innocent, in an innocent party in all this, and this was just shit happens. But the more you look at it and the more you realize it's incompetence on their part, it's negligence on their part, and for them to not have seen what was potentially coming down the road with the tire wear issue and with the potential disqualification, I think it's karma. If you want me to be really honest, I think it's just dessert. Like, what else were you going to expect? This guy's gone over and above your calculations for how far that tire could have and should have gone. You had a driver that's led this race and outpaced everyone. I'll ask you now, do you think, as at a point where it was clear that Oscar was closing in and it was clear that the move was not going to be made through pace, do you think there should have been team orders?
I think it was too late. I think the way the relationships work in that team, by the time, I actually don't know what they could have done differently by the time Lewis had caught up, used his tyre life to catch up to the back of George, because George is never going to just relinquish that position. unless it's like obvious they're losing too much time. And, and as it happened, they judged it all correctly, and George wasn't over the line in defending too hard because he didn't have to, because Lewis never really got close enough to make clear attacks. So had Lewis managed to slipstream up to the back of him and they got to the end of the Kemmel Straight and they were side by side, and that was letting Piastri close in a second every time that happened, and he was like on their tail, at that point it needed to be let Lewis through and then use his slipstream or use his DRS to pull forward. But he didn't get to that point. That's the one tricky part in this, in terms of Lewis, by the time he got to the back of George, understandably, all those tyres were newer, he'd used up way more life by pushing to catch him up. And the DRS zone was 75 metres short or whatever this year. It was quite hard. We saw throughout the race, it was pretty hard, even with a pace advantage, to get past someone in front. And that was what my worry was. The moment George asked, consider a one stop, and then the team said, "Are you sure?" And and then they went with it. I was really, really worried from that point onwards that the exact thing that happened would play out and happen, because it was so hard to overtake. So I don't think the team could have employed team orders, really. That needed to happen earlier. The team order needed to be them being assertive, saying, "No, George, stick with the plan. That's not going to work." The problem is, actually, in terms of pace, it actually was the better strategy. It worked out well in terms of track position. It's just, had that been pre-agreed, then Lewis would have done that. And so George was afforded an artificially beneficial strategy. Again, like I said before, by doing a worse job, he then got this kind of gamble strategy that was never put in front of Lewis, because Lewis was on the radio saying the tyres are fine. If the team had said, well, in that case, we think potentially, with track position being so key here, just stay out, nurse them to the end. You've got track position. He was obviously further ahead than Russell was. So whatever that was, 10 seconds or whatever he had on Russell, he could have definitely gone. I think Lewis was stopping one lap after Russell, unless I'm misremembering. So I think he had one lap newer tyres, and he was 10 seconds further down the road. So you can do the maths there. He could have gone even more gently than Russell did. So actually that one stop was the better strategy. Lewis would have easily won had he been given that one. The fact that Russell suggested it, that isn't him being a strategy genius. That is, well, the only option for me right now, for me to not finish in 5th or 6th or wherever I'm going to be, is to just stay out. And if I lose position, well, I was going to be down the order anyway. And if it does happen to work, then I look like a hero, which is what he looked like for a while. Lewis didn't have that put in front of him. So that's why it feels unjust, because Lewis was just executing the best possible strategy, as the team said. And there was no mention of, do you want to stay out? He even said it to the team. He gave them that. He said the tyres feel good. So if the strategists had thought, okay, then this is a potentially viable scenario, they could have told him then. It's just that George had less to lose in that situation. So he just said, yeah, do it. That's why it felt unjust that George then got the win. And it feels a bit more like justice has been served, that it didn't actually pay off. And again, that's not me just hating on George. I don't actually have a vendetta against him. I do want Hamilton to beat him each time, but that's more because, I just like Hamilton more. I identify with him because of his age, and I just like him better as a racer. And he's obviously better. We've seen enough.
Yeah,
now.
no, of course. Let's not beat around the bush. He is much better. But it's one of those, isn't it? I feel like going forward now with this, I guess we don't really ever see. Actually, you know what? Before I get to that, one of the things that I argued with people about today, and I'm still not quite sure whether I've changed my mind on this particular part, but it'd be great to get your opinion on it, is, what are your thoughts on, I guess, the reason I asked about the team orders, and I think you're right, by the time it got to the point where the team orders needed to be given, it was almost as if this is 2 or 3 laps from the end now. We can't say, okay, George, Lewis has had to go, he can't do it, you need to go past. In essence, the moment he decided to go on a one stop, and there needed to be an instruction to say, if Lewis comes up behind you and is within DRS, let him through and don't disrupt his race. You're running although you're not running different races because you're running for the first. But do you know what I mean? Potentially that should have happened. Do you see similarities between, and I guess, how McLaren tried to handle their situation in Hungary with how Mercedes have handled their situation today? And I guess, with the fact that one driver who was behind was given what looks like a preferential strategy, which was not discussed beforehand, then that driver then gets, like you say, this artificial lead, which hasn't necessarily been earned, but they've almost had it fall into their lap. McLaren tried to manage it with team orders, which came straight away. Mercedes said, you're free to race. I think, the message from Bono, please leave some space, is quite telling in that this is going to be a fight. I guess, do you see similarities in that situation? And I guess, could Mercedes have made that call straight away, like McLaren did?
Yeah, I see big similarities. They're obviously not identical, but it's exactly as you described. A driver who was having a worse day was then given a preferential strategy. The thing that was different is in the McLaren situation, it was quite clearly for a specific reason. I don't agree with their reason, and I've gone into that before, but they were doing it for a purpose, and it was pretty clear that it was with the proviso that he then let his teammate back through, because they knew that this was going to undercut Piastri, and so it was the team making that decision. Today, it was the driver driving the decision, and the driver, like I've said a couple of times now, was having a stab. It worked out in terms of the race if we discount the penalty. So it was a good team George Russell gamble, but the team should have been on it at that point. So I don't think you can really, if the driver is saying, I want to go for this alternative strategy to help my own race, it's difficult for the team to then impose team orders afterwards because they didn't ask him to do it. He was the one driving it. So if it works out, kind of fair play. It's worked out for you. It's just what that doesn't take into account is the unfairness on the other driver. And you're supposed to be working as a team, and you're supposed to be, you're supposed to have a team aim. And right now you've got a guy who is out there leading the race and doing a stellar job for you, and he's about to bring home this win. And although you don't know how it's going to play out, that that this is going to introduce a threat, because you're now saying your lead driver, who is currently kind of sailing to a pretty easy victory at this point, quite comfortably, you've now given him an additional task that wasn't part of the plan. You've now said you're going to have to make an on-track pass, which it adds a bunch of risk. In a season where Mercedes need all the points they can, they shouldn't be incorporating or like deliberately adding on-track battle risk. There's every chance that Hamilton, Lewis locked up at a couple of corners in his chase of George. He could have easily sent it for a lunge on one of those final laps and hit the side of him. And that was a totally unnecessary position to put him in. That's my view. I think there are some similarities to McLaren. It's not exactly the same, but they're both examples of a team kind of screwing up quite a bit when they've got like an easy result there in their hands.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess, where do Mercedes go from here then? I guess, what is the... Sorry, before I get to that, Christopher, could you get Brad, if you've got it, I'm going to look for it out. Could someone get the initial steward's decision, the race technical director's decision before the disqualification came up? Actually, I'll probably have to get it on here.
We need to maybe discuss the deliberately nefarious Mercedes fuel draining.
We definitely need to discuss. I've got it here. No worries. Right. So this is the 2024 Belgian Grand Prix Technical Delegates Report. This is the report that the delegate makes to the stewards after the cars have been weighed and they're in Parc Ferme and they've been checked. It's probably the same person who did the check on the wing in Brazil, which found the 0.2 millimeter discrepancy, which disqualified Hamilton from qualifying in Brazil, if you remember. This is what he said in the report. And Joe Bauer, I believe is his name, and I will read it out now in full. after the race, car number 63 was weighed and its weight was 798 kilograms exactly, which is the minimum weight required by Technical Regulations Article 4.1. After this, fuel was drained out of the car and 2.8 litres of fuel were removed. The car was not fully drained according to draining procedure submitted by the team in their legality documents as Technical Regulation Article 6.5.2 is fulfilled. The car was weighed again on the FIA inside and outside scales, and the weight was 796.5 kg. Calibration of the outside and inside scales confirmed, blah, blah, blah. As this is 1.5 kg below the minimum weight requested, which also has to be respected at all times of competition, so Technical Regulation 4.1, I'm referring this matter to the stewards. Just to bring attention to this line here, the car was not fully drained according to the draining procedure submitted by the team in their legality documents as the article is fulfilled. My understanding of this is that when the team have sent this car to get weighed, they have not drained the fuel the way that they have told the FIA fuel is to be drained from their car. Therefore, and as Christian Horner alluded to in an interview, they've essentially, accidentally or not, attempted to use fuel as ballast.
Yeah.
I find that part of that document fascinating because I've watched Formula One my whole life. I've watched Formula One. I'm not going to say the amount. You know what? I'm in a safe space now. If I was with Tandy, if I said the amount of time, then he'd be like, "Oh, how old are you?"
I always feel you when she's like that because I'm older than you. So
yeah, you're right. Honestly, it's like everyone acts like Lewis Hamilton's like this. Like, oh, you know, he's like a spring chicken. I'm like, he's older than me. Like, anyway, that's neither here nor there. I've been watching Formula One for 30 years. Nearly 30 years. I've never heard a team fail to remove the fuel from their car in the appropriate way and then it lead to a disqualification.
what about BAR in 2003 or 4?
Brad,
where they were banned for 2 races for doing this very thing. They had that kind of secondary fuel tank that was found at Imola, where they were using exactly this in the second or final fuel stop. They would fill the tank and a little bit extra, so they could run most of the race underweight, and then in the final stint they had to run at weight. But after the race, the car would come in on weight, but some of that was a hidden fuel tank, and then they were banned for 2 races. That's the only example I can think of.
Thank you for that example. No, I love that. Look, today is a day for me being corrected. That's absolutely fine. That's bad, right? Like this
isn't
weird.
Quite the same. Yeah, that was a deliberate cheat.
That was a deliberate cheat.
This seems like a last-minute attempted minor cheat where they've gone, oh crap, we're probably going to be slightly under. Let's just drain the fuel out and then just close the fuel drain plug hole slightly early and hope no one notices. Yeah. And the FIA have gone, hang on, you say you normally drain it and then leave it for 30 seconds to make sure everything's gone. It seems like you closed that after 5 seconds. Or I'm just kind of speculating, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they've had an inkling they were at risk of coming in underweight, and they've then decided to try and just like not quite drain all the fuel out. And that is cheating. So they might be in some big trouble for that.
Yeah. I guess we'll see if anything comes up. We've not heard anything about that. And, I feel like actually, let me go to because there was something else which I also found quite interesting in the decision. So I'll read the decision here. the stewards have heard from the representative of car 63, the technical delegate, the FIA single-seater director, and the FIA single-seater technical director. The car was weighed, blah, blah, blah. During the hearing, the team representative confirmed that the measurement is correct and that all required procedures were performed correctly. The team also acknowledged that there were no mitigating circumstances and it was a genuine error by the team. They did not try to fight this at all. And I guess it's impossible to fight. But I guess it's even more impossible to fight if you're found to have not emptied out the fuel tank properly, right? Like, you could argue, like, how are we to know that the time, are we punishing someone, sportingly trying to make a strategy work or whatever? I don't know, right? But it is harder to defend if you have deliberately or not left fuel in the tank and try to deliberately or not use it as ballast.
So I think the only way we could give any more of an opinion on this is if we had some evidence of how often people get their fuel draining process wrong.
Yeah.
If this is quite a common thing and quite, 2 in every 5 times the FIA check the weight of a car, they go, you haven't fully drained the fuel. And the team goes, okay, yeah, sorry. It's really easy to forget that there's like a bit extra. You need to tip the car. And if that's a common thing, then this is a non-issue. But I suspect this isn't a common thing. And it's a bit of a funny coincidence that the one time they come in underweight is also the time they don't fully empty the fuel out the first time. That sounds like it was on purpose. But yeah, anyway, the fact is they've screwed up in a number of areas here. And it's caused them to lose a bunch of points because instead of getting a solid top 10 with Russell, even if it had been a really bad final stint, even if he'd lost a bunch of places by doing a second pit stop, he would have still been top 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, something like that. And he was comfortably in front of Max, wasn't he? So he would have finished in that position. And they've thrown away those points. They've soured the celebrations for Lewis. They've looked a bit silly when they would have looked brilliant with a 1-5 or a 1-4 or whatever in the alternative. They've just really got this wrong. And they really have. I'm hoping, I don't think this is going to happen, but if I was Lewis, I would be sitting them down and saying, for the 15th time, guys, back me. Look who was doing the better job. Stop trying to do this weird pandering to George stuff. He could be number 1 next year if he can defeat the rookie. If George can get on top of Antonelli next year, then let him have all the preferential strategies then. Right now, I'm doing the good job for you. Yes, sometimes he's in front in qualifying, but every time in the race, I'm clearly stronger. Stop doing this other stuff. If he suggests some bullshit, weird strategy, just say no and say, stick with the program, George. That's why we employ strategists. Why are we paying this guy 300 grand to be chief strategist when George is out in the car and he can just go, just leave me out. And then this happens. So just let this be the last time. We know who's the quickest in the race. Hamilton's comfortable now. The car's pretty much sorted. Just let him see out his contract and get some good results.
Amen. Honestly, look, that's enough hate. It's enough hate. Let's get to some appreciation. Brad, how good was Lewis today? Honestly, there were moments during that race where I feel like, I don't want to keep mentioning it, but I feel like the only thing that could have made it better today was like a beer. And I was like, it was like sunny.
I had a beer.
It was a beer. Like, I'm not drinking. So it's like, a beer. I was like, a beer in the sun right now watching this would be lovely. We've got Hamilton just off the start bullying Perez, who, made a beeline for him, didn't get the start he could get. Hamilton bullies him, makes his way, he's in front. Then, with Charles, did Lewis pass Charles Leclerc on track?
Yeah. Made a great move. The standard move you'd expect at Spa, down the Kemmel straight, DRS.
Yes. And to be fair, that was possible because, again, I don't think it's a coincidence that the two moves the people who were overtaken on track were Leclerc in a Ferrari, which was clearly not really that quick, and Perez, who is clearly in any car right now not that quick. So he gets the job done. And he was sailing off, and I was like, this is like, he is still prime Lewis Hamilton, but this was like watching 2020 Lewis Hamilton, like, you know, just absolutely dominating. That the way he was controlling the gap between him and Leclerc as well, and, you know, the way that he was able to ensure, even though Leclerc tried to undercut him, okay, cool, probably used his tires, and he came in and he stopped and he came out in front of Leclerc again, although I know Leclerc had like a 3.3 or 3.2 second stop, so obviously that would have helped as well. But just watching him control that race and dominate that race, and it was almost too good to be true. I did remember thinking, wow, this is going like too well. And I didn't want to say like, we're going to win this race, because I was like, if there's a safety, I thought there was going to be a safety car of some sort, and that would bring George into play or whatever, right? But this was such an incredible performance. And I just think, like, Brad, as you know, how many times have we given our opinion on Lewis Hamilton, and you've had people coming into your mentions, into your inbox, telling you that he's finished, he's a washed driver. You know, I can't believe Ferrari have let go. There were people at the start of the season who were saying Ferrari made a mistake letting go of Sainz and keeping Lewis Hamilton. Are you dumb? There were people who were saying that Ferrari should have signed Ollie Behrman instead of Lewis Hamilton. Are you daft? There were people who were saying that Lewis Hamilton should retire from the sport altogether. How could Ferrari pay the money that they have paid for him? And the fact that he's won 2 of the last 3 races, and both of those races were on absolute merit, even more today, that it was on merit. I just think that, oh man, I just feel so proud to be a Lewis Hamilton fan. We've stuck through this. We had to have people abuse us and say all kinds of rubbish about his driving ability. And I guess today, on top of what I thought was an incredible drive at Hungary last weekend as well, and obviously Silverstone, it just shows that, unlike Daniel Ricciardo, he truly never went. He truly never left.
Yeah, so I can't deny in that first stint when he made a good start, I was holding my breath, side by side with Perez, absolute bandit if he wants to be down through Eau Rouge.
Yeah.
That was like, okay, job one done. You know, managed to pull away enough through the first stint and break the DRS of Perez. And obviously then after he got past Leclerc, break that DRS and then just eke the gap away, knowing, you just know when Lewis is doing that, he's not overusing the tyres.
Yeah.
He's doing that in such a controlled way. And he pulled that gap and I was like, okay, the only thing that can stop this now is, the McLaren suddenly coming on song, working better on the hards, as I think they actually did. They did work better on the hards. Or a safety car, and I was just like, fingers crossed that we don't get that. But as the race went on, it was looking more and more like he's just got this. Like on pace, he's just got this. In the first 10 laps or so, I think Lewis was the only one who'd actually made any on-track passes, the way apart from off the grid. He made that pass on Leclerc, and I was thinking, it's actually kind of stalemate. The only one that's actually got through is Lewis made that decisive move on Leclerc. This is great. It's quite difficult to pass, and he got track position. And that's literally how it played out. They were then just mirroring Ferrari with Ferrari tried to undercut, and then they just go one lap. They had enough of a gap that one lap was okay. Although I don't know if you noticed, on one of Hamilton's out laps, he got absolutely screwed by Ocon. So for he came out behind Ocon and then he was stuck behind him for a lap. And where he should have gained, a good second or two on the cars who were pitting after him, he just didn't. It was kind of like status quo. But anyway, even regardless of that, because actually I think that was in the second. Set of stops. And Leclerc came out closer to him than he was. It was 2 seconds plus at the beginning, and then he came out actually a second and a half behind Lewis, even though Lewis had the undercut. But it didn't matter because he still had enough pace to then eke it away and just just basically nailed it and completely judged the tyres correctly. So much so that he even said to the team, the tyres feel fine. And he was like half suggesting extending or going for a one stop or whatever. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, to summarize, great performance. Wheel to wheel, he's looking more confident.
Yeah.
As we probably suspected at the start of the season, when the car gets better, Hamilton goes with it in a way that other drivers don't. We've seen it year after year. I don't know why we forget it. And I also realized during your talk about a minute ago, this is the first quick stop that I've been on. I appreciate this isn't the main podcast. The first one I've been on since Lewis has actually won again, because we've had this period. I first came on when it was, the beginning of the bad times. And now we're like on the cusp of potential return to the good times. Certainly, we've got the rest of the season here where he could win more. I remember you saying on a recent podcast, like, if Hamilton's only win is Silverstone this year, you can like live off that for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to. You've eaten again, and you're going to eat more. We're going to feast for the rest of the season.
Amen, brother. Amen. And you're right. I think that's the thing. It's just like, man, it's crazy how your perception shifts. I think like Silverstone just felt like, oh my God, like we've waited so long for that. And then obviously we get Hungary and then we get today. And it's just like, I think back to what you were saying, Mercedes, what do you want? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, do you want wins? Do you want to finish as high as possible in the table? Do you want a happy Lewis Hamilton, a content Lewis Hamilton who trusts the team, who trusts the strategy, who feels listened to? Look how it's going now with a car that, again, sorry, I forgot. Do you remember when people were sending memes around about how the car has been developed towards Lewis Hamilton, and then they were saying that's why it's shit? Look now! Feast your eyes! Dickhead. So, I just think the rest of the season could be so great. It's such a shame they took so long to figure out this car. It's been like 2.5 years, man. Like before they figured this car out, and it's just like, wow. If they had not taken that Brazil win and just thought, right, fine, we're gonna stay with this concept. And if they'd gone away from that, if they just said, you know what, that was fine, but the rest of the data throughout the season suggests that this isn't the way to go, and they just started developing.
And another thing, that Brazil win, sorry, this just reminded me, another Jamie Russell thing, just whilst you briefly mentioned that. Remember how Russell only got that? Hamilton was looking quick the whole weekend, and then Russell caused a red flag and got the pole because of his red flag that he caused. Just jammy. And then obviously, and then Verstappen decided to just, enact massive terrorism because it's Hamilton trying to pass him in the race. Obviously, he has to hit him. Like, it was just those things again. And he still nearly won. And he admitted to it. Yeah.
No, he still nearly won. And I think someone said that he didn't. Someone tried to correct me and say that he didn't have floor damage. And I was like, you definitely did. And it definitely
that was just
Lewis
another
Hamilton
one on the list of injustices in this era of Mercedes. But sorry, I derailed your point. If they'd have just not won that race, and they'd have not thought that maybe zero pod is fine, and they'd have just worked harder, we'd have maybe been at this point we are now a good 6 months or a year ago. But whatever. I've just looked at the standings. Lewis could plausibly still get third in the championship this year again, despite how far off he's been. So it's going to just depend on next few rounds.
Well, look, like I don't see why he couldn't, especially if developments of Red Bull go how we think they're going to go.
He's one race win off of third. One race win from third in the standings.
Who's third again?
Just over. He's 27 points. So right now, third is Leclerc. And Ferrari, it was an anomaly today how well Leclerc did. So Ferrari haven't really been in that position recently. So
no.
He probably won't catch Norris, who's on 2 race wins ahead, exactly 2 race wins ahead, but 49 points basically. But he could definitely overtake Sainz and maybe Piastri.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm just feeling a little bit delulu. I'm just saying, like, look, if people's cars maybe break down, if like accidents happen, Verstappen potentially nearly did not finish the race last week. Like, that was entirely plausible.
Oh my God, how many non-Verstappen wins? Verstappen hasn't won in ages.
4 races now. And he was not like, and I don't think he would have won today if, like, even though like he was on pole, I don't think they had the pace to convert that pole into a win. So I don't know, man. If Verstappen has like one more, if he has like one more DNF, I'm just gonna start going for like Lewis Hamilton title. But no, it would be ridiculous, especially with the gap to Norris as well. But it would
another
be awesome.
thing. And just this is backtracking. Another thing on Lewis's performance today. Remember how today he had great race pace in the dry. So the car must have been set up for the dry during that horrible conditions qualifying. And the guy stuck it P4/P3 on the grid with a setup that was clearly for today. Like, again, I know probably most people had this compromise. Maybe not Max, maybe not Perez, because I doubt Perez would be, you saw how he just didn't have the pace in the race. So Lewis was up there doing those times on used inters with a dry setup. So he's not washed.
Nowhere near washed. Look, I think that's a great place to leave it. Guys, thank you for listening. To everyone on Twitter, I'm sorry for going against the cult. I'll never go against the cult again. Please accept me back into your arms. I'm sorry. Accountability lives here. If you've got to the... you know what, Brad, sorry. Thank you for joining me today. That was lovely.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
No. Pleasure's mine. Where can people find you online?
Right. So on Twitter, obviously, that's where I get most of my orange hate. So it's just at Bradley Philpot. But YouTube is where I'm trying to grow the most. So go search me on YouTube. Got a load of videos coming out this month. The channel's growing. We're nearly at 13,000 subscribers.
Nice.
It's mainly go-kart content and occasional sim racing. But go check that out. Go watch me beat all the Formula One drivers at the Race of Champions. Admittedly, it was like nearly 10 years ago now. But just go watch that video anyway. And yeah, thanks.
No worries. And look, I would second that. Some incredible content on there. Makes me want to get into go-kart. I'm not even going to lie to you. Like, I've seen how you helping out Van Gene as well. Like,
the channel is just Brad Philpot. I didn't actually mention that. Just type Brad Philpot on YouTube and you'll find it.
No, go check him out. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We'll be back literally tomorrow. Well, I guess whenever you're listening to this, but this is part 1. There'll be a part 2 where I'm sure Queen Tandy will have a lot to say about today. So obviously she'll be here and we'll be here with Mahad from Pit Stop Fracas, so we can laugh at McLaren a little bit, well, just Lando Norris. But if you've got this far, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5-star review, a rating on Apple Podcasts, and obviously the Patreon's there for an ad-free stream. Guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, keep it on the black stuff. And to all my Lewis Hamilton brothers and sisters, don't piss me off. Don't let them bring you down. But I beg you, man, comment in the comments trying to live this result down. Please, I double dare you. Keep it on the black stuff. Look, mate, if you've got this far, clearly you like what we do. So here's a link to subscribe to the Quick Stop F1 family. Give that a click. And here's another link to some more cool on our channel. Sorry, cool stuff. And remember, no matter what happens, keep it on the black stuff. Click the stuff. Click the links. Click the links. Click the links. There. They're there.